Have you ever looked into a new product or service but were deterred because you couldn't quite figure it out? It sounds basic, but for any business to be successful, customers have to know how their product works. That's where product education can often be the overlooked ingredient that makes or breaks a business. Today, we'll be learning all about it by speaking with someone who does product education for a living, Jotform's very own Morgan Ziontz. Welcome to Momentum, a podcast by Jotform where we talk about the technology, productivity tips, insights, and best practices that help us move forward in business and in life. Let's get started.
3, 2, 1, liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Maintaining momentum.
All right, we are live and here with Morgan Ziontz. Morgan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So let's dive right into the topic for today, which is product education. Now, that's a very broad term. It can encompass a lot of things depending on the industry, of course. But what does it entail at a company like Jotform?
Yeah, so that's a good way to preface that question, is that it can be anything, a lot of different things at a lot of different companies. At Jotform specifically, it means taking a holistic look at how we talk about our products and our features and developing a program that speaks to that. So largely we're doing webinars currently, and we do webinars anytime there is a new major product or feature release. Those webinars are meant to, we give demos, so they are meant to be kind of a technical overview of that product or feature. But another piece of that is also providing use cases, so letting people know how they might use that feature, why that feature might be important to them, why they might care. So, we're largely doing that through webinars currently, but we are looking at other ways to expand. There might be more coming a little bit later this year for that. Yeah. Making that big picture overview.
Yeah. So how did you get here? How does one get into product education in your mind? Like, if you could summarize why is it so important?
Yeah. So I got into product education pretty incidentally. So I don't have a career path for other people who are interested in that.
Don't think there's a degree in it. But.
No. I majored in psychology and then I was in accounting. So then I got into marketing somehow. So I started at my last job as sort of a support role for a team called the outreach team that was customer marketing, and they were doing basically the same thing. So, again, checking in with customers, learning about how they were using a product and figuring out how to better show them how to use the product. Not quite as much technical training as use studies, use cases. And the company was going pretty quickly, and they needed people to step up and do more of that as well. So I quickly had to move from being that back-end person and supporting the team to actually doing some of that. And my role was very similar to what I'm doing here at Jotform. So I did webinars, I did in-person trainings, I helped develop what we called the university for the company, where it was an intensive couple-day training where people would come to us. And I found that I really loved it. I really loved, despite really being a back-end person before that, I really loved working directly with customers. So, to me, being able to help people get to that light bulb moment, finally seeing something set in or really realizing how or why they should care about something, that was really significant. And I really liked that piece of it and decided to pursue my career in that. So,
sure. Did you find that transition from being more of the back-end person, as you were saying, to taking more of a product education focus? Do you find that transition natural, organic?
It eventually became natural for me. I do have public speaking experience and background experience.
Which is important.
It is. So I felt like I was pretty well prepared to step into that, but I had a lot of anxiety about being that more visible front-facing person.
Yeah, that can be daunting.
So, for sure, yeah. So I did step into it pretty hesitantly, but obviously, I came on at Jotform to manage webinars, and that's what I've been doing for the past 2 years here. So
you've done an awesome job.
Thank you. So as soon as I could get over the anxiety or get the anxiety to a manageable place, it has been a pretty natural thing for me, and it's clearly something I really enjoy.
Sure, absolutely. And people might not realize, being sort of the face of product education, you are kind of the face of the company for many people who come to Jotform and are trying to learn more things about it, whether it's through webinars or other videos. You really have to put yourself out there. So overcoming that is extremely commendable. Let's talk a little bit about how product education and marketing intersect, because even in like my MBA I'm taking right now, we've talked about, is product education marketing? Is it kind of a different category from marketing? In your eyes, do you consider what you do marketing per se, and what's the difference?
Yeah, I absolutely see it as marketing, and I think especially with SaaS companies, when you have a SaaS company, you're not just making a one-time sale, you're making an annual sale. So you have to continue to prove value to your users year over year. If you decide to raise prices, you need to be able to show them that there is a reason you've raised prices. So it's absolutely a function of marketing. You know, I'm supporting the sale of the product year over year to people. That being said, it absolutely intersects with other departments. I work very closely with our product team. I could also see, customer support is also very similar. In my opinion, product education, again, is that more holistic overview and also a proactive approach to showing people how to use a product or service, whereas customer support might be more reactive to their questions and their concerns. So, it's sort of two sides of the same coin.
Sure, and I guess if you think about it in terms of like the marketing funnel, what people think of as marketing might be the advertising or the flashy billboard that can first attract customers. But really, marketing is also keeping customers engaged and interested and functional once they are onboarded. So it's absolutely maybe a little bit further along in the marketing funnel, but I'd agree it is definitely part of the marketing funnel. But would love to hear anybody's opinions on that.
Sure.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into kind of the meat of what you do, which is webinars for now. We have some other stuff in the works, but for now, webinars. The average user might see a webinar, might tune in or watch a recording, but really have no idea of the effort that goes into creating them. And you've been doing this for a couple of years now, more than that. Can you talk a little bit about what goes into making a product webinar at Jotform?
Yeah, so any 35 to 45-minute session, which is what we're shooting for when we do a big product release webinar, for example, that could mean over 80 hours of work on my end. So for the bigger ones, not for the smaller ones. The biggest piece of that is that I have to very thoroughly understand the product myself. So there's a lot of the education on my end. And then I have to take that and translate it into a script. And I don't know who I'm talking to. We get people registered. I do have a sense, but am I talking to somebody who is a brand new person? Am I talking to somebody who's an experienced user?
Yeah, I mean, we promote these, but you have no idea,
Right, exactly. So there's probably people on both ends of the spectrum.
Sure.
For our bigger webinars, we might have 500 or 600 people on the line. That's a huge number of people. So I have to be able to translate what I've learned about a product into something that will be easily understandable for those new people, but also still engaging for those who are a little bit further down the line. And then I have to create a demo from that too. And again, same thing there, something that is engaging for people who already know their way around, but also pretty introductory for other folks. So a huge chunk of that 80 plus hours would be that piece. But there's also a lot of scheduling. I'm not the only person on the team who does webinars. I do the majority of them.
You get some help here.
But and some people might know Lainey. She does our enterprise stuff. So Lainey will write and deliver content for enterprise webinars, but I still manage all of the scheduling. So scheduling is not just figuring out when we can do a webinar, but it's also figuring out when we can time an email, so that it's not conflicting with other things that we're sending, making sure that I can schedule something close to when we're releasing it, making sure that we can send follow-up emails on time. So there's a lot of that scheduling. There's a lot of working pieces there. And then after sessions, another huge chunk of the time is going through all of the questions that we get in registration.
Which are a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if you think, 500-600 people online, we might have 200 or 300 questions.
Right.
So I go through all of those before. I'll sort through them, start to sort through them before the webinar, and I use those to inform my content.
And that's the benefit of asking ahead of time if you
Yes.
have questions
Yeah.
with the registration.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It benefits me as much as the audience. I
Right.
think, if I am seeing a lot of introductory questions, I might lean toward being more introductory, providing more overview. So it really helps me inform my content, but the audience gets more out of it then. So I do comb through those initially, but after the fact, that's something that I share with our product team and our developers so that they know what questions people are asking about the current offering, what they'd like to see developed out of that, and even like the general questions. What are people still asking about introductory things? I might use that to inform new webinars. In fact, this year I'm kind of doing a back to basics, a little bit of a focus on that with some of our webinars because we get so many questions that are a little bit more, can you show me XYZ about just using the product? That's a pretty, questions from new people. So I share that with the product team, but that's another huge chunk of the time. So there is a lot that goes into webinars.
Yeah, no kidding. There's just many layers of complexity. One, from becoming a product expert yourself.
Yeah.
You're probably as, if not more, knowledgeable about the Jotform product than I'd say many people on the marketing team, because you have to understand the nitty gritty.
Yep.
You have to be able to do it live in a demo. You need to be able to present and talk about,
Yep.
the primary talking points, and you need to be able to answer detailed questions about it. So that in itself is impressive. Then when you add in all the coordination that it takes, because the logistics of when we send certain promotional materials
Yeah.
and when we're going to schedule and when we think that most customers would want to tune into a webinar, how soon after launch and when we announce it, all these factors.
Yeah.
But I like what you mentioned about communicating with our development team afterwards, because this is where it kind of, to circle back to the marketing conversation,
Yeah.
it gets into product marketing
Yeah,
a little bit,
it
because
does.
you maybe more so than anyone else are getting that real-time
Yeah.
feedback about how are customers perceiving this product, how can it be bettered and improved upon, and being able to channel that feedback to our dev team can really help us improve our
Yeah.
products at the end of the day, because
Yeah.
the development team, they might not have access to feedback like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's a really powerful part of product education,
It is,
and
yeah.
how it ties into product marketing that people might not realize. That alone is why you need a product education manager on your team, honestly, because then that will help you make a better product.
Yep.
But yeah, no, it's really exciting to hear about everything. Goes into a webinar. Have you ever had? I've got to ask. Does anything ever go wrong? I mean, you're live. These are not pre-recorded. These are happening with potentially hundreds of people on the line at once. Has anything ever gone wrong? Because I feel like that would be my worst nightmare.
Yeah, that's part of where the anxiety came in that I initially had to
Understandably, you
overcome.
gotta have nerves of steel.
Yeah. More, I would say there's something that goes wrong in almost every webinar, and part of my job is to
Wow.
smooth that over so it's not as noticeable.
Almost every webinar is a high percentage of them.
Yes, it is. Most of the time, that's something small, like I advanced the slides too quickly,
Yep.
or we've had a couple, one or two times where the product just isn't loading quite as quickly as I wanted,
Yeah.
and so I have to figure out what to say to buffer that.
Yep.
So yeah, a lot of my role is just being able to think on my toes when it comes to things like that. But I will say there was a time at my last company, not a webinar I was delivering, but when I was helping manage and doing behind the scenes stuff, where the internet went out in
Oh, no. Oh.
in
That is worst
yeah
case
in the
scenario.
entire office, the entire city, I think, and
Perfect.
so it did come back on quickly, but we had to scramble to figure out, like, do we try to go back to the webinar? Do
Yeah.
we email everybody and tell them we're going to reschedule? And we did wind up coming back online, and I think also rescheduling. So thankfully, knock on wood, that has not happened here.
Just that scrambling.
But
Ugh.
it's, you never know what you're going to get when you do things live.
I can only imagine. Did you have, just out of curiosity, did you have any sort of live speaking experience before you started doing webinars or public speaking experience?
Yeah, not off the cuff like I often have to do with webinars,
Right.
I have spent a lot of my life doing public speaking, going back to high school where I spent 4 years on speech team. I was a very cool kid in high school.
Very cool.
Most of my weekends were spent getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do speech tournaments.
Dedication. I mean, look where it's got you.
I know. My old speech coaches would be very proud. And I will say, I wanted to quit after my first year, and my mom wouldn't let me, so I grudgingly have to give her some credit for that one.
That's amazing. I love that you did that in high school, and it's paid off in a serious sense because I mean, you can script these out to a T, but no matter what, you're going to probably have to deal with, like you said, some of those intangibles. So being able to have that comfortability, that goes a long way.
Yeah.
Moving on, are some, we have a lot of products here at Jotform. Obviously we're a form builder, but if you think of the other products we have, like tables, apps, approvals, are some just in general, some topics, some products harder than others to sort of wrap your head around for webinar? Because we're a drag and drop, no code form builder. We try to make things easy for the user, but that doesn't mean it's always necessarily as easy for you in like channeling these ideas into a nice, tidy webinar. Would you say that the experiences are normally the same doing webinars, or does it vary drastically depending on the product?
It's kind of a little bit of both. So despite the fact that I've been in SaaS companies for almost 15 years now, I'm not a particularly tech-minded person. Again, I was psychology and then accounting. I was a behind-the-scenes person.
Maybe that's why you're good in the role.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, in a lot of ways probably because, I have to learn it again and, I have to start from scratch too. So it really depends. There's always a moment with every webinar where I think I'm never going to understand this. How am I going to do this? And then there's a moment, 2 days later where it just clicks. Like all of a sudden, it just comes together. But again, not being super tech minded, some of that does take longer than others, especially the bigger products like approvals. That was a pretty major release with a lot, very different from our form builder.
Right.
So I did have to spend extra time figuring that out, and that can take a little bit longer. I just kind of try to add in some buffer room to make sure I understand all of that. But yeah, it just depends on when that light bulb moment happens for me, and
it's
when
all
I
about
can
the
get
light
there.
bulb moment. And you're trying to get our customers to the light bulb moment as soon as you can. That doesn't mean that it necessarily comes right away for you. What would you say are some of the kind of unique challenges that people might not expect that's associated with your role or with webinars in general?
Yeah. I would say just going back to all of the moving pieces and how long it takes to do any webinar. So if you multiply that by, I'm usually writing 2 or 3 at one time. And they're all in different stages, but that means
we
that
have different release trains and products out.
Yeah. That might mean that some are in the early stages of still planning, some are writing, some are, I'm getting ready to go live and deliver the webinar. I may also be helping Lainey put together some of her webinars and all of that scheduling. So I'd say the biggest challenge, and this might not be a unique challenge, I'm sure all project managers come across this, it's just juggling all of that. Because I work with so many other people. I work with our designer to get slides designed. I work with our growth team to get messaging out. Again, working with the product team. If I have questions, I also have to check in with the product team before that. Working with the other folks on the marketing team, the writers, on their knowledge of the product because they become product experts.
You want to make sure
well.
like messaging aligns and all that sort of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Making sure I can get a run through done in time. All of those sorts of things, and doing that for again. 3 or 4 webinars at any given time.
Yeah, it's really a cross-functional role that people
really
might not
is,
realize because if you, especially for a tech company, your company is your product, so that spans basically absolutely everything, and you are kind of bridging that product to customers. You're like that first line of defense. So I think you make a good point just about the flexibility that's required, especially in the tech industry where things are constantly changing. Maybe we need to make an improvement to a product, or we need to push it back, or maybe we need to release something suddenly sooner than we expected for whatever reason, So having that flexibility to kind of go with the flow and be adaptable is really important. We sort of touched. I was going to ask kind of what's the most time-consuming part, which I think the correct answer would be all of it. But I know earlier you hit on maybe just figuring out the demo, or would it be more like the coordination? Like what does take up the most time?
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to say time consuming because it is really, that is what webinars are. But yeah, for me, the biggest part of that is coming up with a demo. The demos are not scripted. I do generally write an outline of what I
you
want
have an
to
idea
do.
of what
but
you want to show.
Exactly, yeah. So I usually script out slides and, know what I want to say for slides. And I do have a script that I can look at. But for that, again, I have to know it really well because it's not scripted. I'm doing that off the cuff. And
Right. We aren't forging that. That's a real thing, using our actual product.
Right. And, it'll be a little different every time I run through it. So I do try to do a number of run throughs to make sure that, again, not just that I know what I'm doing, but that it's coming across clearly. I do run throughs for other people as well. So it is really coming up, I would say, the entire process of coming up with the webinar content, but the demo is probably the most
right, because you want to find a good example that can speak to as many people. The use cases out there are so varied.
Yeah.
You're never going to be able to encapsulate all of them, but try to encapsulate as many as you can. And to circle back to something you said earlier in the conversation around customer entry points, I think that was a really good observation that people might not realize, because of course you don't necessarily know who's tuning in.
Right.
Some people might have used Jotform for 10 years and be an expert in almost everything, but they just want a little bit of information about this one part of the new product. And some people might have just not even heard of Jotform or just signed on, and they're really starting from scratch. So trying to bridge that balance and try to not make it too introductory but not too complex. I imagine that's got to be a bit of a hurdle that you kind of have to manage with every webinar as it comes up.
Yeah, and I try to I think for the most part it's customers tuning into our webinars, and that's how I envision it, but there are always people who are not users as well who may be entirely coming in from scratch here.
Yeah, because they got email or saw some banner about it, or like, let me learn more about this. And be able to start with at least an introductory spiel about what we do and stuff is then important too. So finding the balance is very important, obviously, with product education in general. But to sort of make it full circle, I guess if we are to kind of summarize and find the silver bullet, if it exists, in your words, what would you say is the secret to good product education for startups out there, or for companies that are just looking to, instate a product education department or position? How should a new company approach it? What is the key in your mind, having done this for years?
I think the biggest key is to not overlook it. I think especially for a new company, there can be a tendency to try to hit the ground running and make your sales and do what you have to do to get new people in. But there will be a point, again, especially with SaaS companies, where you have to continue to sell the product year over year. And that doesn't mean you have to dedicate an entire role to product education, but having some resources set aside for that is, I would say, crucial. Again, this is your holistic look at the product. This is not a reactive answering of questions. This is educating people as you're growing, as your company is growing, and as they're learning about things. So first and foremost, I'd say make sure you have some resources dedicated to that. The other biggest thing I would say is to know your audience and know how to reach them. And I'd say that's key for any kind of marketing. But a lot of times it's webinars. In certain companies, people might not tune into webinars. So what are you going to do? I know in addition to what I do and the webinars that I do and the other things that I'm working on creating, we have a lot of other different types of resources available to people as well that are like short form videos versus my long videos. So maybe you're a company that just, people are just going to care about those shorter videos, or they just want to see, reels or TikToks from you, or whatever the case may be. Know who your audience is and know where they want to hear from you. And that is the big key. Yeah,
that's great advice. And it all works in tandem at the end of the day. And ultimately, like you kind of said at first, good product education keeps your customers being customers at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's what convinces them to stay on and keep giving money year after year, right? And convinces them of the value of the product.
I think it benefits everybody, right? Like you're getting people to subscribe to your product year over year, but it also benefits them as well. You're not doing it, in my opinion, I don't do this to make money for the company. I don't know if I can say that, but I do it because, I want to make sure that people know what they're subscribing to and what they're paying for, and really be able to utilize the product and get the full value out of the product.
And it benefits them in another roundabout way because it helps make your product, our product, better.
Exactly.
Because that's,
Yep.
again, as we
Yep.
talked about, kind of the first line of defense to getting that feedback
Yeah.
from people to then make improvements that will help them. So I think you summarized that really beautifully there. I guess, yeah, what do you like most about what you do? Sort of just looking holistically on it
Yeah.
as product manager for Jotform. What attracts you to this?
Again, I love working with customers, and I think you said earlier, I'm in a pretty unique position. I am a face that people recognize, and I do try to know the product really well. So people do come to me. People will follow up with me after webinars. I do also always share my email after webinars. So people will follow up with me. People will follow up with me maybe 6 months later because they know that I was able to help them. And if I can't help them, I'm not going to ignore that email. I send a lot of people to our support because although I know the product very well, our support team is going to be much better equipped to handle some of the
Sure.
more technical
Sure.
issues. But that being able to have those interactions with customers and to know that I'm somebody they know, somebody they trust, somebody that has been able to help them, that makes me, it really does go back to my psychology background. It makes me feel, it makes me feel good, and it makes me feel good knowing that I can help them. So that is, that's one piece. And I'd say that liaison piece, that being a person who can provide so much feedback for our product team as well, is also something that I really value. They have showed me in person what they do with that information and how valuable that is to how they develop the product. And just knowing that I've been able to deliver something to them that helps them with their work is
Absolutely.
also really, one of the things I love too.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you've done an awesome job, and we are so grateful to have you. Couldn't agree more with all that. Anything else you want to touch on that we missed here? I think we kind of covered the basis of what product education is, how webinars work, how you approach your job. I think it's been really informative. Anything else we missed?
We do webinars almost every other week. So
CTA, tune in.
Yep, tune in. You can check out jotform.com/webinars for any upcoming webinars, and stay tuned for more from me and from us later this year.
Great. I would do a sign off myself, but you kind of captured all the points I was going to
Sorry
hit,
for
so
taking
I
your
think we
job.
can leave
Yep.
it on that. Thank you so much for your time. It was awesome to have you. I've learned a lot. I hope our listeners have. And we'll see you on the next webinar.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.